Director of Omnichannel Retail at Chef. And hey, Steven, how are you?
Hi, how are you? Thanks for having me.
Good. And we've been talking about omnichannel on the main stage pretty much all day and how the retail landscape is changing. So first, for people who don't know Chef or aren't as familiar with it, can you just go and say just a brief logistics of how it works?
Yeah, so Chef started as the first direct-to-consumer, non-subscription-based meal kit company back in 2015. We've since expanded to sell meal kits not only online, but also in grocery stores, including Costco, Sam's Club, Target, and most recently launched kits into 500 office fridges in San Francisco through a partnership with Bite Foods. And so we're kind of always trying to be where the consumer is and not necessarily forcing them into a subscription model online that has its own challenges.
So if I'm a brand, how do I partner with you?
It's a good question. We have about 150 plus partners across our e-commerce all the way through to retail. And our founder realized the customer acquisition challenges of the meal kit space, and instead of building a subscription model, built a kind of partner-based meal kit platform. And so online we're partnered with everybody from Campbell's to Nestle to American Heart Association, American Diabetes Association, Atkins, where we're really building a meal kit offering for them, which then they are then turning around to market to their consumers. We're working on partnerships with big pharmaceutical companies that need to that have patients on drugs that need very specific diets in order for the drug to work. It's a very open-ended partnership platform, and we have partnerships across 7 or 8 different verticals online.
So as kind of an emerging company within the retail space, what is it like working with some of the legacy big food and big pharmacy players, and how do you kind of bridge that gap in communication and sell why you are good for them and have them a part of this?
It's an interesting question. It's certainly a challenge. Very different cultures at Campbell's and at Chef's. We learn a lot from them. They learn a lot from us. We actually plug into the innovation teams, both at Campbell's and at Nestle, where they have a budget to learn from startups effectively, and some of that is kind of doled out in the form of investment. Campbell's wrote a $10 million check into Chef last year, but we have weekly meetings with Campbell's, and they're in our office or in their office all the time and constantly iterating on new ideas and building data platforms for them, because these huge CPGs have never had a direct-to-consumer arm. They don't really know who their customer is because for 40, 50 years they've been selling through the traditional distribution grocery channels, and we kind of give them a direct-to-consumer arm that they never had before. And so it is a pretty symbiotic relationship. One really couldn't exist without the other. And we also have a very different partnerships in retail, where Smithfield Foods, our largest shareholder, kind of runs the distribution of our meal kits into Costco and Sam's Club and BJ's and others. And that's another different partnership with its own set of challenges, but again, one where they wouldn't have had a product in market as quickly as they could have gotten it there through us, and we wouldn't have the massive sales team that's out selling it into retail from Smithfield. So we work together pretty well in that sense.
Now, in terms of not only just workplace culture, but also skill sets, what are you learning from your partners, and in turn, what are they learning from you?
It's a good question. So Smithfield, as a good example, there's no one at Chef who really has a ton of experience selling product into the grocery channel and navigating buyers, setting up purchase orders, literally taking a product from an order, getting it to shelf. They have a ton of experience doing that. They've been doing it for 40 years. $17 billion worth of pork is what they sell every year. And so they're pretty much experts in grocery, but they know nothing about e-commerce. They have never sold anything online. That's not just completely true. They have a small business online, but they're learning from us: email marketing, customer acquisition, retargeting, things that we have a team specifically focused on that they really don't have expertise in. And so that's kind of a pretty good example of a mutual learning, I guess.
Now let's talk about your new Bite partnership.
Yeah.
Last week we just saw Snack Nation got a $12 million investment as well. What is so appealing about Office as a retail channel?
Yeah, it's a good question. Most data says that millennials are going to grocery stores less. People have less time, and so I remember I read a nice quote from Sean Kelly, the Snack Nation CEO, about putting product where the millennial consumer spends most of their time. And as work culture has changed and people are spending longer hours in the office and are also more cognizant of what they're putting in their bodies, it makes sense to put a product in front of them at a time and a place where they're actually making their eating decision. And the kind of thesis for our partnership with Byte is that Byte does these kind of smart, unattended vending machines in offices that you swipe a credit card, it opens the door, you're charged for what's taken out of the refrigerator. And so they sell a lot of product from 9 to 3 every day, but they really hadn't cracked the dinner market. People weren't buying a tuna sandwich and bringing it home for dinner, but with meal kits, which 90% of our meals are eaten at dinner time, people are actually buying them now through the Byte fridge on their way out the door at night, and saves them a trip to the grocery store. And it's a good experience. Our meals are generally 15 minutes or less prepped to plate, and they serve 2, and generally cost anywhere between $12 to $18 depending on the office that it's in. And they're a little bit off the beaten path. It's meals that somebody might not think to cook themselves. We think chicken pad thai, chicken tikka masala. And so we're kind of servicing that customer on their way out the door at the end of the day. And we think it's a pretty interesting partnership that we're hoping to scale outside the Bay Area in the next 6 months.
Awesome. And in terms of other partnerships, do you have any partnerships in the work that you can speak to or give hints about?
Yes, we have, without naming any names specifically, we just finalized what's really a co-packing contract with a really interesting smart kitchen robot device that'll go to market end of this year, early next year. Really interesting brand proposition. It's going to be co-branded with our name on it and theirs. Most people don't know this about Chef. We actually have a very large business doing fulfillment for other brands. It's
interesting.
About a third of our business is actually doing fulfillment for other meal kit companies and other connected kitchen devices. And so that will be announced later this year. And we're also working on 2 separate deals with large pharmaceutical companies, again, where they make a drug that combats the side effects of a very specific cancer. The drug only works if the patient is eating a very specific diet. They're probably not in a position where they can go out and go food shopping every day, and so we're building meal plans for those patients, which will be subsidized by those pharmaceutical companies. And so if you kind of think about that and think through things like IBS and low FODMAP diets that affect 1 in 5, 1 in 6 Americans, building meal plans for those people could be really interesting longer term.
I hadn't even thought about the hospital aspect of this. That's a really cool channel, I think, and an idea with that.
We actually ran a pilot program with University of Pittsburgh Medical Center last year for diabetes patients who needed to eat a specific diet. And another one where we have one case study now, we're trying to replicate it on a larger scale with unit economics that makes sense. So it is pretty cool when you think about where that could go.
Yeah, that's very cool, and the impact, I feel like the potential impact there is huge. So we're running out of time, but the last question I really wanted to touch base with you on is, obviously, meal kits has been a topic of conversation over the past year as we see some rise to the top and we see some really kind of hit some bumps in the road and start to have falling off because they haven't been able to master retaining that customer and having them come back over and over. So what do you think about just the overall landscape of the meal kit space in this evolving retail landscape, and what does it take to be a successful one?
Yeah, it's funny if you look at, we are constantly checking Google Trends charts and looking at meal kits and Chef and what that chart looks like, and meal kits have gone really up and down, and I think they're trending back up right now given the recent M&A activity with the acquisition of both Green Chef and Home Chef by HelloFresh and Kroger, respectively. And our view is that the market is going to continue to become an omni-channel, continue to grow into being a more omni-channel place. Subscription was, great for building the category and building awareness, but it doesn't really make as much sense from an economic perspective. People don't want to eat the same food every single week. No one eats at the same restaurant every single week. No one eats like that. And so giving people more optionality and giving them the opportunity to buy a la carte, one-off meals in places like in their office, and we're going to be launching in apartment buildings with standalone fridges in San Francisco as well. So the omni-channel play is the future of meal kits, in our opinion.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for chatting with me today. I really appreciate it, and we'll hope to chat after I get off here.